super fun, and all about artisan cheese and more to melt your peaceful heart and toast your peaceful life. Coming to you from the Appalachian Mountains of southwestern Virginia, this is the Peaceful Heart Farmcast.
Hey, this is Scott Hall from Peaceful Heart Farm, and you are listening to the Peaceful Heart Farmcast.
Hello, everybody. Melanie Hall here. Hope you are doing well. The conversation today and every day revolves around the value of tradition, traditional food prep and storage, traditional cooking, and, of course, traditional artisan cheese. Topics discussed here are designed to create new perspectives and possibilities for how you might add the taste of tradition to your life. Well, where do I begin? Some of you are new, and I want to welcome you to the show. I hope you enjoy the content and will share with others. For my regulars, you're probably wondering where I've been. I've missed doing the podcast for the past few weeks, but it became impossible for me to continue because my health took a very bad turn. I just had a bout with a perforated appendix and associated abdominal infection, and I'll get to all of that. Today, I'm going to contrast traditional medicine with modern medicine, so stay tuned. First of all, we're going to do some Homestead life updates before getting to modern medicine versus the traditions in pre-modern medicine. And the recipe today is going to be homemade yogurt. So as far as our Homestead life updates, life here on the homestead's been chaotic at best. It's starting to settle down now that I'm out of the danger zone and on a path back to health, but Scott has had to take up the slack. And there are some things that just didn't get done. Scott has been doing all of the milking without my assistance since about the 1st of August. That is nearly a month now. His morning chores have lengthened from a couple of hours to 3+ hours. And that takes a bite out of his day, but he's taking it in stride. You do what you got to do, as they say. So let's talk about the baby quail. He built the, quote, grow-out cage for the baby quail. Oh, wait a minute. I don't think I've even mentioned them. I'm pretty sure that the last you heard was the eggs were still in the incubator, right? I became ill the very day they hatched out. It was also the day that I would normally record the podcast. And so that's when I kind of dropped off the radar. So the quail and I share that anniversary. Birth and illness. Their birth date and the start of my appendicitis. Anyway, they were in the brooder for about 2 weeks, and we kept them inside under a light the first week. So the light keeps them warm as they have down feathers, but no real feathers when they're born. But their growth is phenomenal. Within a week, they more than double in size and become nearly fully feathered, just within a week. And by the end of the second week, they are at least tripled in size or more, and the brooder space gets really small for them. And the sheer amount of waste they create in that small space, really, it will stink up the place. At 2 weeks, they are ready to be outside. So Scott built a second-story condo onto the quail cage and put the new ones on top. There are 2 large sections up there and lots of space for them to roam around in. The laying hens and their roosters are down below, and there are 3 sections there with 3 sets of hens with each one with a rooster. And so some of those new babies will become laying hens and fill out those 3 laying sets of hens. I can't remember. We have the 3 roosters, but we need probably 4 or 5 more hens. And we've got 31 of them up there. So the rest of them will end up going to freezer camp. And we don't have chickens yet. So my plan is to raise up a batch of quail every couple of months, and that will provide us with poultry. My freezer has been bare of poultry for a very long time. I mean, occasionally I will buy one of those rotisserie chickens at the grocery store for a treat, but mostly we've been doing without. We have lots of lamb, beef, and goat for our protein sources. And what about fish, you say? Well, we have fish in the pond, but no time to fish. That will come even later. At the moment, we rarely have fish. It's a treat. I just might fix that tomorrow night. All right, so let's talk about the cows, the sheep, the goats, donkeys. I don't really have much to say about the animals because Scott and I haven't talked much about them. He hasn't reported any issues. I assume they're all in fine shape and doing their duty. They're eating grass, making milk. He moves them from pasture to pasture at the appropriate times. Soon it will be time to breed the sheep for their spring lambing. Of course, the cow breeding is already going on. Oh, we did separate the ram lambs. I say we. How funny. Scott did it. 10 lambs were born on the homestead this year, and 5 of them are boys, and they are now happily grazing with the older boys from last year and the herd ram. So the lambs have lost most of their cuteness, but they're still a joy to watch as they just live their lives out there in the pasture. Currently, I can see them out my living room window. Now the garden. The garden, that's a giant weed bed for the most part. The tomatoes, celery, sweet potatoes, and eggplant, they were dying of thirst for the most part. They have survived the ordeal, and Scott was able to give them more attention after I was released from the hospital. And so even with the drought, we have lots of tomatoes. And I think I might have been overwhelmed with how many tomatoes had I been able to keep them watered. We would have had lots of tomatoes, and they would have been big tomatoes. The ones that we have now are definitely stunted, maybe 2.5, 3 inches in diameter at best. Many of them are even smaller, but they're turning red. They're good-looking tomatoes. They're just really small. And what am I doing with all those tomatoes, you might ask? I'm making tomato sauce. It's actually a fairly simple process if you have the right tools, which I just happen to have. Let me give you just a brief outline of that process, and perhaps I'll make a whole podcast on making tomato sauce at a later time. It's really not that hard, as I said, if you have the right tools. And the first 2 steps involve getting the skins off, the seeds out. And so I just cut the tomatoes into quarters or 6ths or 8ths, depending on their size, and I throw them into a pot on low heat. And then the water comes out really quickly. And there's no need to add water. You just put them in there, and as soon as they become warm, the water starts separating and it becomes liquid all around them. And once they come to a boil, I let them simmer for about 20 minutes or so. And then I let that cool for at least a couple of hours, and it makes it easier to work with that pulp for the second step. And that's the separation. This is where the proper tools are required to make it easy. There are lots of ways to do it, but I prefer the least effort and the smallest mess. I have a KitchenAid mixer and the food mill attachment. So all I do is put all the pieces together and turn the mixer on and just feed those tomatoes right through the mill, and voila! Tomato juice and pulp are separated from the skins and seeds. And I did some yesterday. It took about 20 minutes to mill nearly 4 gallons of tomatoes. And then the next step begins tomorrow, that I have to cook out the liquid until it becomes a consistency that I want for my sauce. So just slowly boiling it on the stove. Again, it's just easy. You put it on the stove and you stir it occasionally. And once it reaches the proper consistency, then I ladle it into jars that I've prepared for canning. And this is a water bath can. So they just get jar lids, put them in the hot water bath, 15 to 20 minutes, and that's it. Homemade tomato sauce. I do put a little salt in there too. I'll do a whole podcast at some point on the details for those that want to try this for themselves. I went through those steps really quickly, and it really is easy. But if you've never done it before, you probably want a little bit more detail than that. I want to keep this podcast as short as possible, as my energy level has a very strong tendency to kind of drop through the floor without a moment's notice. I still have lots of healing to do. So what actually happened and how did I deal with it? When I first became ill, I worked with what I had available to me at home that I could do without becoming involved in modern medicine. There are two reasons for this. Number one, I've always been able to do this without issue. And number two, we have no insurance, and modern medicine can be really expensive. So it started on a Saturday, and I was in really bad shape by Sunday morning. And my self-diagnosis said that I was trying to pass a kidney stone. After all, I'd had the experience a few months earlier, and I got through it without much trouble. It's painful, but actually now I wonder if the earlier episode was really a kidney stone, and I'll never know now. The symptoms they're so similar between the symptoms of passing the kidney stone and the appendicitis. It's the physical exam really that kind of gave them the first clue, plus the imaging studies, which I'll get to in a moment. And initially Scott thought it was a problem with my colon, but I was adamant that it had to be another kidney stone and that I just needed to get through it. And then the fever started on Sunday, and we got out the antibiotics. We keep them on hand for just such an emergency. Normally, you can knock an infection out if you've got antibiotics on hand. And that actually brought things somewhat under control quite quickly. However, I was still in a great deal of pain, and I was quite weak and unable to do anything. And this went on for a week. And then my fever spiked again. And of course, it was Sunday, and I didn't want the expense of weekend emergency room. And so I did decide that this was outside of my realm of expertise. The infection and fever were overriding the antibiotics, and I knew it was likely I was going to have stronger antibiotics at the very least, and likely IV antibiotics, because it was beyond me. Normally something like that would work well, but not in this case. So Monday, after Scott finished morning chores, we went to a clinic in Mount Airy, and I got blood tests and a chest x-ray, and after getting the results, it was off to the ER for further evaluation and treatment. My white blood cell count was extremely high, and that led to lots of expensive tests, a very expensive CT, along with a move to Winston-Salem and 3 days in the hospital. It was bad. I had a perforated appendix with an associated abscess, lots of infection. Before modern medicine, I likely would have died. It's the old burst appendix scenario that has always scared people, and there's good reason for that. Once that infection gets into you, I mean, it's just about, without modern medicine, it was impossible to control it. And I've been out now for a week and a half or so, and I'm still very weak, and I've been told by my doctor that it may last for 2 months. That is a long time for a farm girl and homesteader. Thankfully, we have wonderful friends and family who've prayed for us and offered real assistance as well. We will get through this difficult time. I'm sure most of you have had similar times, and while it's going on and on, I feel like it'll never end, but it will end. I will recover, and life will go on with many new lessons learned. And so, for a very long time, I've been aware of the wonders of modern medicine. I personally have studied ancient healing techniques, traditional healing techniques. During the early 2000s, I even studied formally and received higher education degrees in natural health and naturopathy. Herbs were my passion for much of that time. I developed my own herb recipes for general heart health, immune system support, and a sleep aid that was a lifesaver for me for many years. I still use these products as well as others. They have their place in my health and well-being. But the awareness of my limitations has always been part of my knowledge base. These traditional healing methods are great for what they do. But there are times when modern medicine is absolutely the best thing. And the emergency room is probably the place where you see that the most. And many would say that I waited too long and should have sought medical attention earlier, and that may be true. But I can't see that I would have done anything differently. It seemed harmless at the time. Who would have thought of appendicitis at my age? Well, it's true, it can happen at any age, but it's usually something that happens before age 30. But you know, statistical numbers group things into averages, and with any average, there is a high end and a low end. Thus, we know that while it is more unusual, it is not unheard of to draw that appendicitis card at any age. Some of you may frequent Facebook groups that are about one aspect of health or another, perhaps a specific diet group like keto. I belong to a lot of the keto diet groups. I also belong to a lot of farm animal groups and farm business groups. With all of these, there will be a smattering of traditional medicine techniques that are put forth for consideration during appropriate questions and health discussions. And then there are times when the group responds with go see your doctor or contact the vet in the case of animals. And it is sometimes we simply don't have the skills, the tools, and experience necessary and must call on that professional help. And this can be a touchy subject in the homesteading community, as most are trying to be as self-sufficient as possible. But I just can't state it enough times. Sometimes you need modern medicine to continue living. Your animals need it. All of the traditional home remedies in the world fail to meet the need at some point, and embracing the best available technology is the only answer. Inevitably, the result is mostly painful, whether it's financially or physically, when you get to that point when you need that kind of help. Here's an example about sometimes the medical intervention causes pain besides financial pain. The treatment causes some injury, and it's the price that we sometimes have to pay to return to health. I thank God every day that I did not have to have emergency surgery. Talk about damage to the body in order to keep it alive. You know, that's the extreme. You're literally cutting flesh to get to the problem, and then that flesh now has to heal in addition to the original problem. I actually got away with a small tube on my side for a couple of weeks and an enormous amount of antibiotics. And as a natural health person, did I like the amount of antibiotics I just received and ingested? Heck no. My guts will need lots more healing that my traditional methods will be able to provide. I know about probiotic foods. Homemade yogurt is in my diet for the next maybe a couple of months every day. We shall see. I have to help my gut bacteria return to normal. Who knows? You know, I didn't like it. I was nauseated day after day because I was on 2 strong antibiotics for 2 full weeks after the IV antibiotics. And then a week before that, I had been on antibiotics before. So, I mean, I was probably a month on very, very strong antibiotics. And thankfully, that is finally over. And I'm going to have some yogurt right after I finish this. I like yogurt, but I don't love yogurt. Eating it every day is not something that I do. I know a lot of you probably do. It's a good thing. It's just not something that I really, really love. I like it and I want it as part of my diet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to get old quickly. But I'll persevere and give my body the traditional support that it needs, and after modern medicine has kept me alive. And how about this week's recipe? How to make your own yogurt. You don't have to have our wonderful raw milk for this. You can make it with any milk from the store that is not ultra-pasteurized. Unfortunately, most organic milk in the grocery store is ultra-pasteurized and will not work. It's still worth it to use conventional milk to have your own yogurt without artificial sweeteners and thickeners, whatever else stuff that they put in there. So you can make your own yogurt from regular store-bought milk. All right, so how do we make homemade yogurt? I make mine in my Kasori multifunction pressure cooker. it has a yogurt setting. I believe it would be similar with the Instant Pot or any other multifunction pressure cooker with a yogurt setting. But you don't have to have one. I also have a rather inexpensive yogurt maker, and the reason I no longer use it has to do with how much yogurt I make in one batch. That small little inexpensive yogurt maker works for a quart or two. But I make 1.5 gallons at a time now. Yogurt will last a very long time in the refrigerator. So I can make 1.5 gallons, and Scott and I will eat on that for probably a month. That's like 6 quarts. It comes out to be maybe somewhere between 4 and 5 quarts, actually, because I strain it usually a little bit. I'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so what do you need? Ultimately, what you need is a way to keep the temperature constant between 110 degrees, no more than 115 degrees, for anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. And that's why all the fancy equipment is sold. It makes it easy. You don't have to babysit it while it ferments. You just set it, and you walk away. Now, you can use the pilot light in your oven if you have one like that. I think better still would be to preheat your oven to 120 or so and then turn it off. And then you're going to wrap your milk with the yogurt culture in it in towels and then use that oven's retained heat to keep the temperature up. You could also place a baking stone in there to help hold the heat in. Again, you're looking somewhere between 4 to 8 hours to get that milk to set up into yogurt. Another method is to use a thermos. Now, some of the best cost as much or more than a cheap yogurt maker, but of course, the thermos would have more uses. And you may already have one on hand. No need to purchase anything extra. Come to think of it, I have a thermal cup that I bought to keep my tea hot for long periods of time. Most people probably would use it for coffee. I use it for tea. It's one of those that you can buy at your local gas store, convenience store, truck stop kind of a place. And that cup, I think it's a 32-ounce cup, so it would hold a quart. And it keeps my tea hot. I mean hot for hours. So if I got my yogurt the right temperature, I could drop it in there and keep it in there for the time. That's modern technology for you, isn't it? You might even have 1 or 2 of those on hand. So again, no need to purchase anything extra. You just need some kind of a vessel to be able to hold the temperature around 110 degrees, no more than 115. Now, the last method I will mention is trying to use a warm part of your kitchen or other place in your house, maybe during the summer. This would require experimentation, and kind of keeping a constant temperature would be dicey at best. But you could give it a try. You could experiment with it. Crock pots get too hot. Don't try that. Even the lowest setting is over 150 degrees, and that'll kill the yogurt bacteria. I've seen people give recipes using a crock pot, and I don't know, maybe they have a special one, but all of mine, even on warm, are heating way too hot for yogurt culture to survive. All right, let's get on to the basics of making the yogurt. Now you've got your particular vessel picked out, and I'm going to give a few more details on how to use each of those vessels a little bit later, but let's just get on to the basics of making the yogurt. All you need is full-fat milk, a small amount of yogurt with active cultures. So I'll just go buy a little 4 to 6 ounce yogurt in the grocery store that says it has active cultures. That's all you need. All right, so set that aside. You're going to heat the milk to 180 degrees, and that destabilizes the proteins in the milk, which makes the yogurt thicken nicely. You're going to quickly cool the milk down to about 118 degrees, and it does go quickly, so you're going to stop at about 118, because the next step is you take the yogurt with the active cultures and just a tablespoon in a cup, if you're only making a quart, maybe even a half a cup of the pull out of the milk that's cooling, pull it out, mix in a spoonful of yogurt so that it gets blended in, make sure it gets incorporated well, and then you add that liquid back into the milk. So you've got the active culture in a little bit of milk, and then you put it back into the big milk and stir it up really well, so all that active culture gets mixed throughout the milk. And then all you have to do is set it in your chosen place and keep it warm for 6 to 8 hours. That is it. That's all you have to do. Heat the milk up, cool it down, mix a little bit of active yogurt culture into some of the warm milk, put all that back into the big mixture and just let it sit. Keep it warm for 6 to 8 hours. Now, let me talk about the different devices. If you're using a multifunction pressure cooker, the way that you want to heat the milk up is use the slow cook setting. On my Kosori, I set it to 193 degrees for 1 hour. And as soon as the hour is up, I check the temperature, which is usually 180 something by then. You have to get it to at least 180. It won't make it all the way up to 193, but it will get to 180, maybe a little bit more. And I immediately take it to the kitchen sink and I fill the sink with cold water. And it only takes about 5 minutes or less. I've got that pot sitting in that cool water and I'm just stirring that milk and I've got a thermometer sitting in it and it will just start dropping down, 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 down. That temperature comes right down really quickly with that metal container sitting in that cold water. And then once the cultures, I get it down to temperature and the cultures are stirred in, it's just a matter of putting the pot back in the device. You close and secure the lid, press the yogurt button. Mine is automatically set for 8 hours. I mean, I could take it out sooner if I wanted to, but it automatically stops keeping it warm after 8 hours. It's just so easy. And then I usually will take that whole pot out, put it in the refrigerator, and allow it to cool down before I'll dish it up into smaller containers for storage then. Now, if you're not using the multifunction pressure cooker and you're going to use some other device, you'll probably use your stove top. So you're using a saucepan on the stove to heat the milk. And in this case, you actually have to stay nearby. You got to stir often so the milk doesn't scorch on the bottom of the pan. And so it requires a little bit more attention, but it's still quick and easy. Like mine takes an hour to heat up, but I don't have to watch it. If you do it on the stove, it's going to heat up in much less than an hour, but you've got to stand there and watch it. So, those are your trade-offs. And once 180 or more degrees is reached, then you put the pot in the kitchen sink with cold water, quickly cool it down, add the yogurt with the active cultures and mix it up well, and then pour it into whatever desired device or method that you're going to be using. All right. Now, the longer your yogurt sits there at the proper temperature, the sharper it will be. And it'll also be thicker if it cultures for a longer time. And if you want it to be even thicker, like for a Greek-style yogurt, then you're going to strain it through butter muslin. And you can buy butter muslin in the grocery store. You just line a colander with the butter muslin, pour your yogurt into there, and then take the ends of that butter muslin and bring them up together, tie them together, and then hang that. You're making a little bag there, and then you're just going to hang it up somewhere to drain. I usually put a bowl underneath it and I tie it up with a piece of string on one of the handles on my cabinets, or the door handles on my cabinets. I'll tie it to that and just hang it there. So what that does is it allows some of the whey to be filtered out, and it will make a much thicker yogurt. And the longer it drains, the thicker it will be. I mean, you can get it just about to almost to a cream cheese thickness if you leave it drain long enough. All right, so that's it for making your own yogurt. It is wonderful, wonderful stuff. You can add a little honey into it, put a spoonful of your homemade jam in there to sweeten it up a little bit. Use it plain, use it in your Greek dishes, use it in your smoothies. I mean, it's just, yogurt is a fantastic food and really good for gut bacteria. So that's it for today's podcast. I am so glad to be back, and I'm so glad you're traveling along with me. We all have great adventures in our lives, so please share your thoughts, your ideas, and your adventures in the comments. What are you doing on your homestead if you have one? What are your plans if you don't have a homestead but you want one? Or maybe what are your plans for making friends with your local homestead community if you don't want one, but you love that others do because they provide great food and recreation for you and your family, right? So you don't have to do it. But you can still be part of that, and you can still have your kids in that environment. You can still learn about all of those things. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're up to it, how about giving some homemade yogurt a try? Or if you'd prefer coming here to learn how, let me know that as well. I'd love to offer some classes in some of the homestead arts. And lastly, if you'd like to help us out in our time of need, you can donate to this podcast via our website at www.peacefulheartfarm.com/donate. I don't know that I've ever mentioned this before, that I have that page out there, but it is a way that you can make a one-time donation, or you can actually do a subscription where you give like $5 a month or whatever, just because you like listening to the podcast and it helps us with our ability to keep going with it. But the very best thing that you can do is share this podcast with others that you think might enjoy it. That helps us with getting higher rankings in the podcast search algorithms, the more subscribers that we have. So if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe. Share with your friends, ask them to subscribe. And I appreciate you all so much. You're not required to do any of this. You can participate just as you're free to just participate as you have been. I just mention all of these things in case that's something that you want to do. I just truly, truly appreciate you all so much. And as always, I am here to help you taste the traditional touch. And thank you so much for listening. And until next time, may God fill your life with grace and peace.